The first time I said no to my husband, he didn't say a word. He just lay there in the darkness, his back turned toward me, breathing slowly, the way a man breathes when he's deciding something. I could hear the wind moving against the side of the house, the small tick of the wood stove settling in the kitchen below, and the awful loud sound of my own heartbeat in my ears. I waited for him to be angry. I waited for him to argue. I waited for anything at all. But he gave me nothing. And in our community, nothing was the most dangerous answer a husband could give. The second time I said no was 8 days later. And 8 days after that, I learned what Amish husbands do to wives who refuse them twice. I learned it the way Amish women always learn things. Quietly, sideways. From another woman who pulled me aside at a barn raising and spoke to me without ever quite looking at my face. Before I tell you what she said, let me introduce myself. My name is Martha, and this is Hannah, the Amish girl, the channel where the stories no one was ever supposed to repeat finally get spoken out loud. I grew up Old Order Amish in Geauga County, Ohio, married at 19, and I left at 26 carrying a suitcase and the heaviest silence I had ever known. If you want to keep hearing the truth from behind the prayer cap, please subscribe and tap the like button. And in the comments, tell me, have you ever been taught that saying no was a sin? Because I was, every day of my life. Now, I need you to understand something before I go further. In the outside world, when a wife says no to her husband, that no is the end of the conversation. In my community, that no was the beginning of something else entirely. Not violence, not screaming. Something quieter and in some ways worse. A slow turning of the entire community against you. So gradual you almost didn't notice it happening until you were already standing alone. The Amish theology of marriage rests on a single verse repeated more times than I can count from the pulpit. A wife submits, a husband leads. That's it. That's the whole framework. There is no companion verse about her comfort. There is no scripture about her tiredness. There is no sermon about the days when her body simply has nothing left to give. The bishop in our district once said from the front of the room that a wife who refuses her husband is opening a door for the devil to walk through. I was 17 when I heard him say it. I remember staring at my hands folded in my lap and thinking, I will never open that door. I will be a good wife. I will never give anyone a reason. I married Jonas in the spring after my 19th birthday. He was 22, the second son of a dairy family 3 farms over, with quiet hands and a serious mouth that almost never smiled. Everyone said he would be a steady husband. Everyone said I was lucky. The wedding was on a Tuesday in May. 300 people in my father's barn. Roast chicken and creamed celery, and 7 kinds of pie. And by the time the last buggy rolled out of our lane, I had been awake for 19 hours, and my feet were swollen inside my new black shoes. The first year of our marriage was what I now understand was the practice year. Jonas was patient in his own quiet way. I learned how to keep his house. He learned how to come in from the barn and find supper waiting. We had a son before our first anniversary. We had a daughter 14 months after that. By the time I was 22, I had 2 babies under 2. A household to run, 3 meals a day to put on the table, a garden to keep, laundry to scrub by hand on the wringer washer my father had built me, and a husband who did not understand why I sometimes fell asleep at the kitchen table with a spoon still in my hand. The night I said no for the first time, I had been awake since 4 in the morning. The baby had been sick for 3 nights running. My oldest had a fever that came and went. I had canned 48 quarts of tomatoes that afternoon, and my back felt like something had broken inside it that would never quite heal. When Jonas reached for me in the darkness, I put my hand gently on his wrist and I whispered, "Not tonight, please. I just need to sleep." He went still. That's the part I remember most clearly. The going still. His hand under mine, his breathing changing, the way the whole room seemed to hold its shape and weight. Then he turned his back to me without a word and lay there like that until morning. I lay awake beside him for hours, staring at the ceiling, listening to him breathe, wondering if I had just done something that could not be undone. In the morning he was already in the barn before I came downstairs. He came in for breakfast and ate without looking at me. He went back to the milking. He came in for the noon meal and ate again in silence. He spoke to the children. He did not speak to me, not that day, not the next, not the day after that. For 5 days my husband moved through our house as if I were not in it. On the 6th day, my mother came over with a basket of bread. She set it on my table, and she watched me move around my kitchen with that careful watching mothers do when they already know something is wrong. Finally she said, "Is everything well between you and Jonas?" And I, who had never lied to my mother in my whole life, said, "Yes, everything is well." She nodded slowly. Then she said one sentence and left. She said, "Martha, a wife who lets the cold in cannot complain when the house freezes." That was it. That was the whole conversation. She picked up her empty basket and she walked out my back door, and she did not look at me again. I sat at my kitchen table for a long time after she left. I want to tell you that I understood what she meant in that moment. I didn't. Not fully. But somewhere underneath my exhaustion, I knew that a message had been delivered, and that the message had not come only from my mother. It had come from somewhere larger, from the community, from the way things were, from the long, unbroken line of Amish wives stretching back generations who had also been told in their own kitchens by their own mothers that the cold was something they had let in. That night, when Jonas reached for me again, I did not say no. I did not say yes either. I said nothing. I lay still and I let it happen, and afterward I turned my face toward the wall and I cried so quietly that not even the baby in the cradle beside the bed could hear me. 8 days later I said no a second time. I don't even remember why now. I think I was just so tired that my body refused before my mouth could catch up. I said, "Jonas, I can't. I'm sorry. I can't." And again he turned his back, and again the silence began. But this time, the silence was different. This time, the silence had teeth. The next morning my sister-in-law Rachel came by with her 3 children. She stayed for an hour. She did not mention Jonas. She did not need to. She mentioned other things instead. She mentioned a woman 2 districts over whose husband had asked the bishop to speak with her. She mentioned how hard that family had had it afterward. She mentioned that the bishop had eventually had to involve the woman's father and her brothers. She mentioned all of this while sipping coffee at my kitchen table, never once looking directly at me, the way Amish women deliver warnings. 3 days after that, the bishop's wife showed up unannounced. She did not say why she had come. She drank coffee. She asked about my children. She looked slowly around my kitchen, at my floor, at my dishes, at the dust on the top of my pie safe. Then she said with great gentleness, "A wife's first work is her husband's peace, Martha. Everything else comes after that. Everything." She finished her coffee. She left. The barn raising was the following Saturday, and it was there, behind the long tables where the women were laying out the noon meal, that an older woman named Lydia, a woman I barely knew, set down a tray of bread and stood beside me and spoke without looking at me. She said, "Child, I'm going to tell you what nobody told me, and I'm only going to say it once, so listen." She said, "When a wife refuses her husband one time, that is tiredness, and a good man understands tiredness. When a wife refuses her husband a second time, that is a pattern. And a pattern is what the men talk about when they stand by the fence after church. By the 3rd time, his mother will come. By the 4th time, his father will come. By the 5th time, the bishop will come. And by then, child, it will not matter what you say. It will matter only what they decide." She paused. She straightened a loaf of bread on the tray. She said, "They do not hit us. That is not our way. What they do is harder. They take the warmth out of the house one piece at a time until you are so cold you would do anything to feel warm again. Your husband stops speaking, then your mother-in-law stops visiting, then your sisters get busy on the days you used to see them. Then the women at church start sitting on the other side of the room. Then your own mother starts looking at you the way she looks at a field that did not yield. And one morning you wake up, child, and you realize that the whole world has gone quiet around you, and the only door still open is the door back to his bed. So you walk through it, and the warmth comes back. And everyone smiles at you again, and you tell yourself that it was your choice. She finally looked at me then, just for a moment. She said, "It was not your choice. It was never your choice. But there is no word for that in our language, so we call it being a good wife." Then she picked up her empty tray, and she walked away. And I stood there behind that long table with my hands on the edge of the wood, and I felt the whole structure of my life rearrange itself behind my eyes. I want to tell you what I did with that knowledge. I want to tell you that I went home that night, and I confronted Jonas, and we had a hard, honest conversation, and everything changed. That is not what happened. What happened is that I went home, and I made supper, and I bathed the children, and I lay down beside my husband in the dark, and I let the warmth come back. Because Lydia had told me the truth. And the truth was that the cost of refusing was a cost I was not strong enough yet to pay, not with 2 small children, not with no money of my own, not with a community that would close around my husband and leave me standing on the outside of every door I had ever known. I stayed for 4 more years. I had another baby. I learned how to read my husband's silences the way other women read the weather. I learned how to tell, by the angle of his shoulders at supper, whether the night ahead would be a night I could survive easily or a night I would have to brace for. I became, in the language of my community, a good wife. And inside, in the part of me that Lydia had spoken to behind the bread table, something small and steady was growing that the community could not see. I left when my youngest was 3. I will not tell that story today because it belongs to a different video. But I will tell you this. The shunning came exactly the way Lydia had described, only larger. My mother's letters returned unopened. My sisters crossed the street when they saw me in town. My father, the only time I ever saw him again, looked through me like I was made of glass. But here is what I learned in the years after. What was done to me in that quiet way after I refused twice, what is done to thousands of Amish wives in thousands of farmhouses every season of every year, has a name in the outside world. It has more than one name. My therapist gave me the words slowly, one at a time, the way you feed broth to someone who has not eaten in a long time. Coercive control, emotional withdrawal as punishment, community-enforced compliance, consent that is not consent because the cost of saying no has been made unbearable. In my community, none of those words existed. We had only one word for what happened. We called it marriage. I want to be careful here because I am not telling you that every Amish husband is cruel. Jonas was not cruel. Jonas was a man raised inside the same silence I was raised inside. He was given a script for being a husband, and he followed it the way he had been taught. The bishop who preached that sermon when I was 17 was not a monster. He was an old man repeating words that had been repeated to him. The mothers and the sisters-in-law and the bishop's wives who arrive at your kitchen with coffee and warnings, they are not villains. They are women who once stood where you are standing, who once let the cold in, who once felt the warmth come back, and who learned to call that warmth love, because the only other word for it would have broken them. The system is the thing, not the people, the system that takes a woman's no and turns it into a community problem. The system that decides her exhaustion is a door for the devil. The system that makes saying yes the only safe word in the entire Pennsylvania Dutch language. If you grew up in a place where your body was not your own, I see you. If you ever lay in the dark beside someone and said yes because you were too tired to survive what no would cost you, I see you. If you were ever told that being a good woman meant making yourself smaller until there was nothing left of you to refuse with, I see you. You were not weak. You were surviving inside a system that was built to make sure you could not refuse without paying for it. Lydia died 2 years before I left. I went to her funeral. I stood at the back of the room in my plain dress and my prayer cap, and I watched them put her in the ground beside her husband of 51 years. And I thought about that morning behind the bread table, and the way she had looked at me for one single moment, and the small, terrible gift she had given me by telling me the truth out loud. She is the reason I knew what I was walking away from when I finally walked. She is the reason I am sitting here today telling you this. If this story touched something in you, please tell me in the comments. Tell me what stayed with you. Tell me if you have your own Lydia, the woman who told you the truth when no one else would. And if you want to keep hearing the stories from behind the prayer cap, the ones that were never supposed to leave the kitchen, subscribe to Hannah the Amish Girl. There is so much more I still need to say. Until next time, remember this. Your no is a whole sentence. It always was. And no kitchen, no community, no quiet man with his back turned in the dark gets to make it mean anything less.